Thanks for the download. Before we start this episode, it'd be great if you could rate the podcast on Spotify or iTunes or wherever you get your podcast from, as this helps me know how well we're doing, if the content is hitting the mark, and it also brings it to the attention of potential listeners. If you do like the pod and would like to support it, you can check out the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes, which helps with ongoing costs such as website hosting. As we approach the end of another year, I'd like to thank everyone who listens to the podcast for their support and kind comments and ratings on social media. A special thanks to all those who have bought a coffee to help out as well. And last but not least, I'm grateful for the continued help and assistance of Nick Beale and his company ISAR, who provide technical support to the podcast. His help has been invaluable in producing our content. Hopefully in December, I'll be launching a Patreon channel to keep the pod moving forward, and subscribers will get access to all past podcasts and early access to new episodes without adverts. Pods from episode 72 onwards will be available in video format and unedited, where the guest agrees to be filmed. There will also be random exclusive video content on a variety of subjects, and non-subscribers will still be able to listen to the podcast in its current form on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts from as normal, so no changes there. My guest today is Loz Moore, a former officer in the British Army, and he was on Pod 62 when we discussed operational tours in the infantry in Afghanistan, Iraq and Northern Ireland. However, on this episode, we discuss transitioning from military to civilian careers and delve into the challenges of resettlement faced by veterans. We talk of our different experiences, my transition after 22 years in the Army, and Loz's abrupt transition due to medical retirement. We emphasise the importance of planning, self-awareness and seeking help when needed, and we also highlight the role of organisations in providing purpose and community post-service. The episode aims to offer valuable insights and practical advice for veterans navigating their own transition back to civilian life. No Desert Island Dits this time, as Loz has been on before, but we do discuss what he's reading at the minute, and a quick correction to my book choice. In the pod, I recommend Memoirs of a Fox Hunting Man by Siegfried Sassoon, but I got the title wrong. I should have said Memoirs of an Infantry Officer. Let's crack on. Hi Loz, great to have you back in the podcast again, mate. Second time up.
Hi Colin, thank you very much for inviting me back. So it must have gone well last time.
Oh, I did. And for those that aren't aware, Loz and I did a podcast a couple of months ago about his experience as an infantry officer in Herrick and Tellick. One of the most popular ones, Loz, not just bullshitting you there. It's got about 4,500 downloads so far, I think. So it's got out there. We're not Sean Ryan and those type of people yet, but we're getting there.
I mean, some of the calibre of the guests that you've been having on, fantastic. And I think that, to be included within the people that you're interviewing, it's a true honour. So thank you for that, Colin. And hopefully I can give your listeners something from my own experience that they can sort of resonate with.
Today's podcast is a follow-up really on the one we did on veterans the other week there. And then during the warm-up, I was saying to Loz that perhaps we should have done this one first. And that veterans podcast has been it's caused a bit of discussion. It's not been divisive because everybody's got their own opinion. And Loz is going to give his own opinion on it later on when we also get a follow-up on Cockle Shell 22, which he runs, and we also discussed during his first podcast. So this one then's on resettlement. I'm going to discuss my resettlement first. And obviously I joined the Army in 1985, left in 2007, so I'm probably quite well out of date and things have moved on from then, hopefully. And Loz will give his version of his journey as well. Resettlement and leaving the Army is all about learning. Got to about 1999, I decided that I better start having a focus on where I wanted to be in the future. And I'd been in the Army 14 years at that point and realised I was going to do 22. I was a staff sergeant. Mm-hmm. So I decided to embark on an open university degree. Back then, and probably still is now, it was relatively cheap. Back then, it's like 600 quid a year. Now it's probably about 4,000 or 5,000. And of course, you had your enhanced learning credits to set that off.
So on that one, Colin, the Open University actually do scholarships now for veterans.
Is that absolutely paid?
Certainly some. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyone who's been medically discharged gets access to a full sort of university degree through the OU.
Well, that's a fantastic thing, that then. And they would use a great way of studying, but again, you've got to be disciplined. And this is pre 9/11. I was getting up at 5:30 in the morning, doing an hour or so, going into work, coming back, repeating that at night. So it does take a bit of discipline. And it requires 6 years to get a degree. And as I say, I did half. And then 9/11 comes along and the world turns upside down. Post 9/11, I did 2 telecs. I was promoted to Battery Sergeant Major, and my final tour was RSM of a regular regiment. I just found it impossible to do those studies. The regiment didn't deploy as a regiment, it deployed as batteries, so we always had a battery on tour, a battery preparing for operations, a battery recovering from operations, and headquarters battery backfilling and keeping the regiment going everywhere else. So the regiment had to be my focus, and I put my personal needs second. But that said, I've always admired people that get an OU degree in the Army because I understand the level of work and dedication it takes. Although I ever did half that degree and never went back to it because there's a time limit on when you can finish it, and I never made that. I then went on to my resettlement. And resettlement back then, I think you got about 1,200 quid. And I think that's regardless of length of service. I found resettlement to be quite chaotic. There's quite a few companies with a lot of self-interest. I don't think the Army monitored those companies effectively enough to ensure that they were delivering value for money for soldiers. And it's a very unsettling time, and you do have to take charge of your own destiny, even if you're maybe not manifestly equipped to take that control. Bearing in mind, you might have joined at 16, or you might be like me, you've just spent 22 years in an organisation that navigates your career and navigates your personal life to a certain extent. So I generally thought the resettlement offer back then was quite a poor offer. And I chose project management as one of the things that I did. I went away to Bristol Management Centre and did that. Never used that qualification since, and it's spiked away most of my resettlement money on it. I had a friend who did a DIY course at Aldershot, plastering, woodwork, a little bit of electrical work. He's had more use out of his resettlement doing that than I ever did. It saved him a fortune.
Was that like Building Heroes or something?
I think it was called something different back then, Loz, but it was that sort of thing. You went down there and they had this big workshop area, and it was all divided into rooms. We did plastering, bit of woodwork and joinery. So is that still ongoing, is it?
Yeah, it's quite a big sort of enterprise, to be fair.
Oh, okay.
And, like you say, if you're learning how to do basic DIY tasks, you're going to be saving money on any of those that you do around your own house even.
Yeah, exactly. So my lessons learned before I get on to Loz is more pertinent because he's nearer to leaving than I was. I think my first lesson learned is you love the Army more than it loves you. Yeah. And a few people have said that to me, and it's true. With resettlement and leaving, you're on your own. There's people around you, but you're the master of your own destiny, and it's the 6 Ps that we're always taught about in the military. And unless you do that groundwork, you're going to struggle. Somebody once said to me, and I laughed it off as a 20-year-old, and I think it was a sergeant who was getting out at the time. He said to me, leaving the Army starts the day you join. And I didn't really understand what he meant by that, but looking back on it now, I understand what he meant. I think what he meant was, and again, when I left in 2007, the Army was starting to do this. They were starting to map across military qualifications to NVQs. Mm-hmm. You know, creating your own portfolio of work, that type of thing. Maybe look at doing the OU, just try to develop yourself. That guy was probably approaching 40, which is ancient in Army terms. And as a 20-year-old, all I was interested in was going on the piss and having a good time. Whereas I agree the sentiment's right, it's hard to instill that in a young soldier, man or woman, who's got their whole life ahead of them.
See, I never saw it like that. I suppose that was because I was just so super committed to this idea of a career in the military that probably why it was like a massive problem when I did leave, because I hadn't even contemplated. But you are right in the sense that it's as inevitable as death and taxes, that if you join the military, you have to leave at some point. You see that with people. It's like they're so blinkered on what's outside of the Army or the military bubble And then fast forward to the point that it's their turn to leave, and it's like, oh, okay. And then, the process starts. But I think he's right, though, that you're not looking too far ahead. I can understand a couple of years out, but you wouldn't want to be doing it like when you're still sort of in...
Oh, no, and he was talking about, from his perspective, this is a guy that's just about to get out. But I think what he was being sensible about was saying things like, any military qualifications, get them mapped across. If there's a way of getting free money out of the army, like your... was it enhanced learning credits, the money every year you get?
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Yeah, you get them, and you get standard learning credits as well, which is sort of go towards different type of courses.
And I'd imagine now, with the army as small and as busy it is, any regular soldier listening to us having this conversation and me spouting off this sort of stuff, be going, yeah, right, mate, that ain't never going to happen. I am never in barracks, I'm never in camp. Again, these are just things that maybe we can have a discussion about to make people think. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
You can only observe what you can observe, can't you?
I was in the mess one night. It was after dinner night. We were having a couple of drinks, and there was a sergeant's wife came up to me, and he was getting out at the same time as me. And she had a go at me about they had nowhere to live. And I did laugh a little bit because I was driving around in a 5-year-old Ford Focus. They had a brand new car. My house was going to be paid off by the time I left using part of my lump sum. They were going on a couple of holidays a year to the Maldives and things like that. And I think there is an element of, again, a bit of self-sacrifice. You can't always... Soldiers tend to live for the day, and I was as guilty of that as ever. There's a bit of forward planning you have to do and a bit of sacrifice when you're in to help make that transition as well. Don't you think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I will sort of touch on this. I think that it's probably the single biggest thing that's lacking within the military context, financial awareness, commercial. And, like someone might get a job working on a procurement program, but that's like silly money that you can't actually quantify. I'm talking about how you best utilize your salary. And my son's in now, and I'm constantly saying to him, save this, save this, save this. Let's get you on the property ladder. Because no one told me that. And it's only through sort of hard lessons after I left, whether it was not having any money or working as a subcontractor on a day rate, and, all of a sudden you might earn quite a nice bit of money, but then you might not work for 3 weeks afterwards. So it's like trying to ration.
Budget, long-term planning. And then when it comes to leaving, I think as a W1 at the time, I was on about 40 odd grand a year. And I was talking to other people in my position, and they're going, yeah, I'm not accepting a job any less than 40 grand a year. Mm-hmm. And 40 grand a year in 2007 is actually quite a good wage.
Very.
It's still not a bad wage now. But my advice to MD is, and this has come through, I can put my hand on heart on this, my own experience now, is get your foot in the door. Take a hit in the wage maybe initially, not too much, whatever you think you can take. Because once you get your foot in the door, you'll prove your worth. And every job I've got into, I have got promotion quite quickly following that and made that money up within a reasonable time frame. I just don't know what your experience is there either.
Yeah, because I did spend quite a bit of time working in, I sort of set up a social enterprise which helped people into the construction industry. And so I got to be quite familiar with that whole process. And I think one of the big issues is that military people get told that civvies will snap you up in a heartbeat. You just need to alter your CV slightly and everything else will just fall into place. And that's not necessarily true. I think that you have some incredible transferable skills. They've been paid for courtesy of the taxpayer because your civvy peer don't get the same sort of level of training and development that someone in the military does. And that's why we should be very grateful. And it's sort of digressing slightly, but people sometimes get a bit ungrateful for that sort of mutual benefit of being in the military. And actually, if you sign up, you get an awful lot of development that your peers who haven't been in the military won't get. And you can utilise them to great effect. But like you've said, you've got to be prepared to start at the bottom again. And so when you leave, you might be the all singing, all dancing expert in your particular field in the military, but that doesn't immediately translate to a civilian industry because you don't know the first thing about it. And say with the project management that you talked about, you might have managed really complex projects within the military, within the artillery discipline, but that doesn't mean that you're an IT project manager or construction project manager. It's not to say you can't be, but you have to start at the bottom again. And so if you have that humility and you can go and, be prepared to pick up a brush and show that you will do what it takes, at a certain point, your industry knowledge will develop and then you will excel as a result of all of that training and development that the military is giving you. I mean, obviously, you could go into certain careers and probably step in at quite a high level. And if money is your main factor, you could go and work at Amazon. You could go and work at some of these big multinationals and you'd probably go in at quite a high level. But it's the same sort of glass ceiling environment that you've got in the military, isn't it? And I don't know, I've always been quite entrepreneurial in my approach, and I'm sure you are, which is why you're doing a podcast. And it's like, after a certain amount of time of being within this giant organisation, it's quite refreshing to be your own boss and choose your own sort of destiny a bit more. And that's certainly what I found.
Just to clarify, I'm not saying people should sell themselves short, but if they see a company they really want to go into, be prepared to negotiate and know your worth. And this is another thing, you've already alluded to it, we have excellent soft skills. I don't think a lot of civilians really understand. And our ability to get things done is another major seller. People used to say to me, what can you bring to the company? And I say, an ability to get things done. And that sounds trite, but it isn't. But you need to know your...
That's literally now what I break down, what I do now. It's like you said, I can get things done. And that is literally what our greatest skill is.
Yeah, absolutely. See, in the army, you're rewarded by promotion and pay. And our pay scales are transparent. Everybody knows what everybody else is on. You can look it up. It's dead easy to know. That's not the case in Civvy Street. And I think knowing your worth is important as well, and knowing how to negotiate. And that just comes with practice and skill. And I think that's another thing we never even got told on resettlement. Remuneration in a civvy job isn't just about money. It's about the whole package. It's your pension, how much that company will contribute to your pension as well, which can be a huge amount of money. Do they offer private health care? Do you get a company car? When I was, my last job was I was head of security university. I put my deputy security manager through a master's, an MBA. The university paid for that. Can't remember how much a master's is. It's a couple of years. It's probably about 15 grand or something.
Yeah, it's going to be found.
Yeah, it's got a fair old chunk. Even things like working from home. These are all things that can be negotiated. Things like when you're talking about wages, they offer you, I don't know, for argument's sake, 30 grand a year. And you can say, well, okay, yeah, not a problem. I'll come in on that salary, but what I'd like to do is renegotiate in a year's time.
I think a big thing as well is it's like you have to be brutally honest with yourself about what's important to you. Because say, for example, you've decided to leave the military because you want to spend more time with your young family. It's pointless if you then go and get a job that's based 5 hours away, where you're only going to be home at weekends anyway. And yes, the money might be appealing, but if the original reason why you left the military is not being satisfied, then you're still going to have a problem, aren't you? And see, but obviously everyone's different, because some people would be more than happy to carry on working away. Some people really want to just be at home, and see, as long as you're true to yourself, then that's going to alleviate quite a lot of the issues, isn't it?
But I also think there's simple planning. When I was leaving the military, I took a sheet of A4 and divided it in two and put reasons to stay, reasons to go. But basically the reasons to go column was way longer than the reasons to stay column.
Yeah.
And I saw, again, my peer group, people stayed in not for the right reasons. They stayed in because they were scared to get out, not necessarily because they're going to continue adding value to the organisation, or the organisation would make them happy, but there's a fear of leaving.
Well, I think that what you alluded to then about the planning, that became really apparent to me. And again, it sort of ties back into that, thank you very much, Army, for giving me these amazing skills, because actually everything that I've done since has been very much based on what I got taught when I first joined the military. And it's like, you don't need to improve on something that's very, very good. And actually it's given me a whole load of tools that I can do all sorts of stuff with. One other thing that you just mentioned there, though, is about like, are you giving the organisation, it's just desserts almost. It's like, I think that we never realise that it's a transactional relationship between ourselves and the military as well, because you're giving something to it and it is giving something to you. And so much like in Civvy Street, you should never feel guilty if you don't want to work for a company anymore. And it's like that's a big part where people slip up, because we take into Civvy Street this notion of loyalty and, selfless commitment. And actually, there's a lot of sharks out there in the big wide world, and, they will take advantage of that. So we do have to sort of, not wise up, just sort of become realistic about the differences, if that makes sense.
I totally agree, mate. I mean, Civvy Street is different. I mean, that goes without saying. But you need to embrace it and enjoy it, because there's a lot to enjoy. Try not look back too much with rose-tinted glasses, because I think that can chew people up a bit. I always remember when I dined out at the mess, I had a really good send-off, and we had a room. Took a room to mess that night, because the next day we were going to Paris. I was taking my wife to Paris for a few days. So I woke up in the morning, massive hangover, and I got out of bed, got a glass of water, and my wife looks at me and she goes, "How does it feel to be nobody?" And I was like, what? I was quite taken aback. But she made a very good point. And this is another thing I think is you lose your identity when you leave the army. It doesn't matter whether you're a private or an RSM or a captain or a major. You are leaving behind a huge chunk of your identity.
I can empathise with that, because I remember when I was serving, even if I was walking down the street in civvies and no one would have known I was in the military, I felt like my chest was puffed out, because I was so proud that I was part of this thing that was so important. And it is, there's no like avoiding the truth that like the military plays a very important part of society's role of good and bad and defending the weak. And so actually you can take massive pride in the fact that you're part of this very small and dwindling number of people that are prepared to sacrifice so much for the greater good. And then when you do leave, whether it's through sort of a controlled process or like myself, where it was literally the ejector seat pinged me out of the aircraft, it was you lose a lot of your identity, and then you have to rebuild your own version of yourself separate from your experiences. There's no problem with being... I love the fact that I was in the military. I love hanging out with ex-military people, and I think that I get them and they get me more than a lot of civvies, and that's totally fine. It's just, it is what it is. And that's why they always say that we don't mix well with civvies, because we don't.
Yeah.
You basically, through the process of being separated from society in this very strange little world, you don't really fully sort of go back into being a civilian, because your life's different, your experiences are different, the things that you've done, the things that you've seen are different. And so it's just an acceptance. But actually that can work in your favour, because what you do find, whether it's me and you talking now, or say you go onto LinkedIn and you really want to get a job at Network Rail, if you find someone who's ex-military who works there, even if it's right at the top of the tree, they will still give time out of their day to speak to you, because the community looks after itself. Doesn't
be necky.
Yeah, but that's it's the same as any other tribe at the end of the day. And we are sort of tribal beings, aren't we? And this is our herd, and rather than trying to fight that, just accept it.
Yeah, totally, mate. And it's like another thing somebody said to me who got out before me was, the loudest sound in the world is that main gate closing behind you. And when I drove out of camp for the last time, that struck me as well. But the other thing is I find is your work ethic. Civvies work hard, but they work differently. They're different to us. And that manifests itself in misunderstandings of what a soldier is. I remember one job interview I went to. I never turned down a job interview, because it's just experience. Even if you've got no intention of taking the job, go for these interviews. But one of the interviews I went for, it came round and they were asking me questions. And the HR woman said to me, "You've been in the army 22 years. How would you feel about working for a diverse organisation like ours?" And I said to her, "As opposed to a non-diverse organisation like the army?" And she went, "Yes." And I went, "Well, my regiment, I had soldiers from every part of the Commonwealth. I had gay soldiers, both male and female." And I reeled off a couple of other things. I went, that type of non-diversity. But the point I'm making there is that it might be different now, but in 2007, there were some real misconceptions about what the army was.
Oh, I suspect they're still the same now. I was part of the Defence Cultural Specialist Unit for several years. And that basically trawled the wider military for people from different parts of the world. Because if you've got a native language skill from this Farsi or Urdu or whatever, you're always going to be better than someone who's gone and done a language course. And so it made sense. But actually, there was people from right across the whole world of both genders that sort of were able to, go into these roles. And I think, like you said, the Commonwealth soldiers that come to us, the Gurkhas, people from right across the world. And so, yeah, that is a complete misconception. People probably think it's still very much like white people that are in the military, but that's just because they're not part of it.
No, once you tell them and discuss with them, it's entirely different. So that's an overview of my sort of time. And I say, clarify, it's 17 years ago. It's probably well out of date, but it's just part of my journey. I think we can't talk about resettlement without letting people know what you went through yourself. So over to you, Loz. How did yours go? Vastly different from mine as well.
Like I could say, mine was a bit more of a sort of a sudden impact. I'd gone into the military, and I think I alluded to this on our last podcast. Very much, my dad was in the military. That's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to sort of have this career, and I'd never thought how long it would last. I just wanted to do that. And it all was going to plan quite well. And obviously you sort of navigate through your career. And then I suppose because of the nature of the time that I was serving, so I probably joined just as you were finishing, and then until 2016 when I was medically retired. And it was quite a high tempo of operations. And like in one way, I was very lucky because I got to be a platoon commander on three separate occasions. So Ireland, Iraq and Afghanistan. And then I went back to Afghanistan as a cultural advisor. So in that sense, it was very good. And I don't really know why I got sort of caught up in the traumatic events of what was going on. But Tom, who you had from Delta, the way that he described PTSD and the symptoms and that sort of constant attrition, I think he really hit the nail on the head. And so if anyone wants to understand PTS, then he's probably nailed it. So, yeah, absolute hats off to him and for you to get him on, because what he described is probably about halfway through his podcast. He just sort of goes into it a bit, and I just find it fascinating because it was like, oh my God, that literally resonates with everything that I experienced.
I think as well, and sorry to jump in, mate, I think the other thing he was really good about explaining is you're talking to a top level tier 1 operator there, but he was very explicit in saying that everybody's experience is different and everybody's tolerance is different. So do not rate your experience to others, because your experience
based on the fact it was a Delta.
Yes, and he really that was quite another eye-opener for me that he said that, I think.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's like everybody's worst day is their worst day. And so you might have some posh kid from wherever, and like the worst experience they've ever had in their life is when daddy took their phone off them for an hour. Or it could be you've grown up in care, and so you've got a completely different experience. And it's exactly the same in sort of combat operations as well. And just because you were the guy that was stagging on the main gate, it doesn't mean that you were in any less fear of a mortar attack or any less in fear of an IED. And the damage that does to you internally at a cellular level, it's like that's what happens, because it's the trauma and the consistency of that fear and trauma and experience is what gradually erodes you. And so, much like we have this saying about the straw that broke the camel's back, I don't know what the actual incident was that made me have PTSD as opposed to being stressed out, but it probably wasn't that significant. And it's not like everybody has this single huge cataclysmic incident that causes it. It's just an erosion of your capability to withstand stress. And that's exactly what happened to me. And it wasn't like, it didn't become apparent on ops. It became apparent when I was getting wound up about the bins. We have different coloured bins for different things, and so one of the bins hadn't been taken out or emptied on the right day, and it got me really angry. And it's like, why am I getting so angry? about this when I've just been on operational tours and been in firefights and all this other stuff that's occurred. And that's what became apparent to me. Something wasn't right. And so since 2016 and today, I've had quite a expansive journey of understanding mental health, trauma, transition, putting the pieces back together, acceptance that what I had then, I'm not going to have again, but actually I can have something better or equal to. And so that's really what I wanted to come and discuss with you today. And it's only my own observations. And it's like what we said before, everybody's observation and everyone's opinion is going to be different because we've all served at different periods. We've all served in different theatres. Society has been different in each of our experiences. 1980 or late 80s society is completely different to the social media generation of today. My lad's in now, and his experience is going to be completely different to me, even though there's probably going to be a few people still in who served when I was in, or even when you were in, and so on and so on. And so it's just that we all have different experiences, really. And so I can only really talk about mine, and some people will resonate with that and some people won't. And I got diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and I got sent home and basically wait out until we decide what to do with you. And that was quite traumatic in its own self because, as I said, all I'd wanted to do was be in the military. I used to walk around feeling very proud of what I did and the position I held. And so when that all gets taken away, plus your wages, which is kind of important to pay your bills, everything sort of crashed quite rapidly because your car company still wants the money, the credit card company still wants the money, your mortgage company still wants the money. And I was like, well, I don't even know what I'm going to do. How am I going to earn? How am I going to sort of cope, survive or anything? And I did that thing that a lot of people do, which is to sort of self-medicate primarily with alcohol. So I can completely empathise with people that go down the route of having sort of that self-medication, whether it's drugs, alcohol or something in between. And it's only really with the realisation that's not ultimately helping. It might sort of mask it for a short period, but then when you sort of come straight again, it's all those problems are still there. And so somewhere in that sort of haze, I kind of realised that, you know what, I've got to take responsibility for this. I've got to take personal responsibility because it's pointless me trying to blame other people, whether it was my old commanding officer for calling me out in front of the blokes or whether it was because my missus left me or whatever. I just thought, this is on me because no one else is going to help me. And that becomes really clear when you look at the generation of grassroots level organisations that have popped up probably since in the last sort of 8 to 10 years. And I'm not talking about the likes of Help for Heroes and Robert Elford. I'm talking about just people like me and you that think, oh, there's a gap in the provision for service people. Let's do something about it. And so I think that when I'd sort of got to this realisation that it was on me to sort myself out, I then leaned into the tools that I'd been given, all of those military tools of planning, sort of observation, preparation. And so I kind of had this massive issues in front of me, whether it's relationship, finances, spirituality even. And I sort of compartmentalized them into different sort of segments because it was the only way I was going to be able to sort of overcome them. But once I got them down on paper, and I literally did write it all down on paper, from having a sort of going through family's court to get access to my kids, getting this divorce finalised, finding a new career that I actually wanted to do. It was a lot clearer because I could see how I had this challenge in front of me, but it was all sort of broken down into little pieces. And so just over a period of time, keep working. And I actually got into a lot of like reading. And I read a lot of self-help books, personal development books, even business books, entrepreneur books, because it was all like new to me. It's like just absorbing as much knowledge as I could to figure out how I was going to move from this point here, A, to B, where I wanted to go.
Did you read that, What Colour's Your Parachute? Have you heard? When I was leaving, that was one that was going around. It's a very American type book, but yeah, I did the same. Just reading all those type of things, how to get, it's weird that I did.
But I knew it worked. I knew that it worked because I've not got any interest in that type of stuff now. And it's like, at the time, it was fascinating because you have these people sort of talking about different aspects of leadership and, entrepreneurial skills. And a lot of it's been really, really useful because I realised that I needed to find something that I felt as much love for as I had done for my military career. Because whilst we're probably never going to get over some of the highs of military experience, being in a firefight or whatever, you can find something that you can attach yourself to that gives you as much fulfillment. And that's going to be different for different people. But as long as you're true to yourself and you find what you actually care about. And to cut a story short, the things that I became passionate about were sort of adventure, military history, the therapy side of things, and doing that through the guise of leadership, service, trying to give back, because I had a lot of help. A lot of people came and helped me when I was going through this process. And so when I'd got to the point that I knew, like, okay, I'm all right now, not like healed, but all right, I can sort of cope on my own. That was the point I wanted to give back, because it's so important that part of my own healing journey was to offer that to others. And it's almost as if like someone's pulled you out of the fire, and then you can just either crack on your own, like sort of happy as Larry, or you can go back in and pull the next person out. And I think that is what we naturally would do as this military community anyway. And it's whether it's you giving your time up to put this group of people together so that your listeners can say what I'd say or what Tom says or what anyone else says, or I do with sort of my Cockleshell organisation, or acting as an ambassador for the Royal British Legion. And it's just we do it for the greater good, really. And that's kind of where I got to after a period of time, but it wasn't like a straight transition from leaving to that. It was quite a roller coaster, and it was pretty challenging, and you sort of learn that rock bottom isn't actually rock bottom, that there's quite a bit more to fall. And when you think you can't have possibly had any more drama in your life, you get a little bit more, and it's like, oh, when's this going to end? But it does. And you just have to persevere. And I think that this is where I sort of really started to learn about my own spirituality, a connection to something greater than myself, because I'm not going to bang on about religion, but I know for me and maybe for other people, having that faith actually is quite important when you're going through a particularly difficult time. And what your conception of faith is, is entirely up to you. It's no one else's business, really, as long as you're not like harming anyone else. But I just think it's, well, to be honest, when I was in Afghanistan, I had some really sort of surreal incidents occurring, and it's like you'd be on patrol and you're going through, I don't know, like a little sort of field or whatever, and I have like a weird thought in my head: don't go left, go right. And it's like, I don't know what that was. I'll go right then. And anyway, like an explosion had occurred to the left, and it's like, bloody hell, what was that? And I don't know if like you've ever had anything like that, but I certainly would have these spidey senses, and like by listening to them, I'd like avoid sort of pretty damaging consequences. And I was like, this is strange.
I wouldn't say I've got a faith, but I've always been envious of people that have faith, because I think it makes them a calmer person, less focused on themselves. And I can identify what you're saying about ops, whereas I think every soldier's been in operations and faces the possibility of dying questions their place on earth, and is there something out there? And I think most soldiers would. I think there'd be very few soldiers who haven't thought of that, because I remember on Granby, the Padre came round, and it was that awkward shuffling of feet, and then people would go over to have a brew with the Padre and a chat with the Padre. Yeah. And what they said was between them, but there was a lot of people who had a chat with the Padre, because at the time everybody thought it was going to be like Armageddon. So,
Yeah.
And I think Army Padres are vastly underrated position in the military. And I think the true worth doesn't come out until you go in ops.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And like I saw, like personally, the first few patrols that you're going out on, everyone's ignoring him. I'll take a free cigarette off him or sweets or whatever. Not actually engaged in anything further than that. But then a little bit later on in the tour, a lot of people would be going over to him before they're going out. And it's also like, did you ever have a lucky pair of boxers, or did you have like a talisman?
Yeah, soldiers. You
know what I mean? And it's like, so, well, what's that then? Does that mean that
it's fate? It's a fate of sorts, isn't it?
Yeah, of course it is, because you're basically thinking that this power higher than you can have some sort of influence on your outcome. And it's the same as if, like, I don't know, you had a lucky mascot when you went into an exam as a kid. It means that there's a potential. And this is the thing, we're never going to know until we die anyway, are we, what happens next? But if there could be the potential that there's this, godlike figure watching over us, and at the end of our lives we've got to answer to him, let's assume that is true, and let's just try and live as morally and as well as we can do, and we should be all right. And that's ultimately what guides me now. And it certainly in terms of the charitable aspect to what I try and do, it's just thinking, well, actually, we should try and be as good to each other as we possibly can. And things could have been completely different on those operations. We could have been the unlucky one that got blown up or killed. And actually, if we've been allowed to sort of have this life beyond that, then we should try and make the most of it and be as worthy as we possibly can. And so that definitely ties into why it's important to give back, to help others. And it saddens me so much when I see people that don't quite make it through, and whatever the demons are, that they don't get the help, or it's just becomes so insurmountable for them. Because I think that if you just bear with it, and it doesn't matter what you've experienced, it can get better.
Yeah. And
I don't know what your thoughts.
So, talk about my journey there, talk about your journey. Two different journeys totally. Similar aspects in some respects with regards to the planning and expectations. I'm interested now in just exploring a little bit about Cockle Shell 22. Probably worth just giving a quick overview on what it is, but the soldiers, sailors, airmen, because you deal with all services, if I remember correctly, they've all gone through the resettlement process. So what does Cockle Shell 22 give them? That, do you know what I'm getting at? Because we've had, I'm not explaining myself very well there. Cockle Shell 22,
no, I understand.
It's filling a gap. What is that gap?
This is what I was alluding to before. You've basically got loads of people right across the UK and beyond setting up these little niche activities to cover some aspect of what a veteran in transition requires. And for me, that mission, the sense of purpose, being able to give back and lead in that construct of military history, adventure, and therapy, that's what led me to sort of help set up Cockle Shell 22. And it basically, the need it fills is to give individuals who perhaps are struggling with the mental health, that they might not be looking for, a career advocation. They're just looking for that sense of belonging and community, which they had in the military and then they don't necessarily have afterwards. It does that. It allows people to come together and go and push themselves on a particularly arduous expedition. But it's not like you can just turn up at the airport and go and do it. You have to put all of the pre-work in as well. So fundraising, training, purchasing of the kit, coming together and planning the expeditions, making sure that you've done your recce's. So it gives a sense of purpose to each of the individuals in it. I could try and do it all myself. Any good leader knows about delegation. If you can create an environment where it empowers its own members to then take the lead, it then has given the opportunity for people within the group to say, if Loz did that, I can do that, I'm going to do it better. And so that's what we're seeing right now. So we've got Tom Rendell, who's taking a group of Falklands veterans back down south next year. And it's phenomenal because you basically got these chaps that are 60, 65 years old, maybe haven't been down to the Falklands for 40 plus years. And they're going to go back and they're going to do a really arduous kayak and walk expedition from Pebble Island down to Goose Green, a bit of a portage, and then go down to Fitzroy. And so that in itself is just monumental. But the fact that you've got the age, you've got the logistics, you've got the fundraising that's been taken, that's going to really sort of set the bar in terms of the expeditions that we do. But each of the individuals on that is giving them a massive sense of purpose, a massive sense of belonging. And I'll speak to them, and as an inadvertent consequence, their own mental health is being benefited. And it might be that they're happier at home. It might be that they've got a sense of belonging and purpose and motivation. So we've got that. And then Steve, one of my fellow directors, has basically put on a corporate trip for a group of ex-England rugby players to Norway. And the reason for that is that we need to raise money to do these expeditions. And so he's been able to put together an expedition to Norway for a group of clients, and they're each going to get sponsored by their own organisations, but then buddy by us, and it'll give them a real sort of commando experience. And so they're the two big expeditions that are being worked on now. And we've also had the opportunity to be part of a TV series called Commando, and it replicates these World War II raids that we've done as expeditions, but like looks into the history of them and recreates them as a docudrama. And we have been asked to come along as sort of safety staff extras, and that also obviously helps us to become self-sufficient. So there's some massive things going on, and like it's just so amazing to be part of it and to see it just take its own energy and move in whatever direction it's going to move in. So we do all that, and then I've got the great fortune of being an ambassador for the Royal British Legion. And I know that last year we raised an awful lot of money through the Poppy Appeal, and I was very lucky to be part of the TV campaign for that. And because it's obviously raising so much money that then gets given to our veteran community, it's like being part of that is something that's very rewarding, because with an organisation like the Royal British Legion, you're in safe hands, that they're going to use that money well and it's going to go and benefit. And it's like the type of stuff that they do actually do. It's helping spouses, it's helping the families, people with secondary PTSD, it's helping the kids, it's helping provide white goods and services and repairs, obviously career support and the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme support. So what they do with that money is just phenomenal.
See, that's another thing. I think that when I left, it might be changed now, but there's no workshops given how to navigate all that help out there. It might be different now, but when I was there, there's a whole host, and soldiers are notoriously bad at seeking help because they think it's weakness.
Yeah, so what I've seen with that is that you obviously get the Career Transition Partnership Programme, but I didn't even go to mine, but no one could make me go to it, and my head was in the wrong place, so I wasn't going to go.
You didn't miss much from what I remember.
No, and that's the thing is that, if you're told you've got to go to this workshop and you're going to sit in an education centre for a week, people aren't necessarily going to pay attention because they don't realise the significance of it. And so then when they get out, they might not have benefited from that. Then a lot of organisations have tried to create directories and sort of capture everything and become the node at the centre of the network. And the problem is with a lot of that as well, it's like, especially the government-based stuff, like why am I going to go onto a government website to tell me what to do? Probably not. Why am I going to go onto that website to do it? And so I think that the only way you really reach the whole of the network is through the grassroots approach, because John from Ellesmere Port is probably going to trust his old corporal. He's not going to trust someone from the other side of the country who's a civil servant. And I think that it's about how you connect with people. That's not to say that the support's not there. And what you will find is that literally for every single possible outcome that you could consider, there will be an organisation supporting that. And there is so much amazing work going on right across the country. There's loads and loads of people giving up the time, loads and loads of people sort of offering free courses, free training, veteran support. So there's not really any excuses not to sort of get ahead with that support. And it's more a case of just, you have to take ownership. Yeah. You have to take personal responsibility for where your life goes.
We made that clear at the start from our own experiences. You've got to take ownership. Nobody else is going to take you in the hand and lead you down that path.
They're there to help you.
Yeah.
They'll be there to help you, but they're not going to do it for you. And this is what you've got. Like, as soon as you realise that, and you can see that there are so many options and so many different routes that you can go down, you start to go down then. Yeah.
So if you were to come to you and say, Loz, redesign career transition for a person leaving the forces, what would be the priority or the top 3 priorities for somebody?
Well, if you think about it, when anybody goes into the military, they have to go through quite a prolonged basic training, don't they? To turn them from a civvy into a soldier or an airman or a sailor. But we don't do that in reverse, do we? We do the CTP, which is literally you can go there or you're on guard for the week. And so perhaps there needs to be a more graduated process. And I know that in the sport, so in rugby, when someone's coming to the end of their playing life, they will do resettlement, but it'll be, say it's over a year, you might go for a month working for an organisation and then come back into your safety of your bubble for another month. And then you might go back out for another month and come back into the safety of your bubble. And so through that process, your finances aren't being harmed because you're always being paid. And then you should, in theory, be able to step straight into your next paid employment within the correct field. And so I think it's just that it should be a longer process, but it should be more managed.
Totally agree.
You'd have to come out of your normal military job in order to go into almost like a resettlement unit.
And I think that would pay for itself in the long run. I'd call that the goldfish effect. I'm old enough to remember that you could win goldfish at fun fairs. And you'd come home and you'd take the goldfish out, it's a plastic bag, you'd stick it in the bowl, and invariably it would die. And the trick was that you took the goldfish in its bag and you put the bag in the water and let the ambient temperature adjust gradually over time. I'd call that the goldfish effect. You're taking somebody from that environment we have just described, throwing them into it. And I remember I was quite a confident bloke, did 22 years, was a W01, and you're thinking, is somebody going to give me a follow-up call here to make sure I'm okay?
Yeah.
I felt vulnerable. And I'm actually quite embarrassed. I can feel my neck glowing saying this to you now. But so I think that would be an absolutely fantastic idea. How long it would be, but I think it would pay off societally as well. It would cut down a lot of mental health issues with veterans, and that reverse basic training, if you like, would be an absolutely really good initiative.
I think so, and I think that you're entirely right with the sort of mental health aspect of it, because some people's symptoms don't present themselves until after they've left, and so that's why you find that there's a lot of people who are still going to sort of have that crash. But if you're doing it on your own and you've not got any of the safety net that you would have had in the military, it can be a lot more damaging. And so if I know that it's always going to come down to money, isn't it? But one of the other things that's always I found absurd is that the military or the government will spend so much money on the training of an individual who then could just leave after 4 years, and there's no other beyond return of service. But actually, if you thought, well, here's a guy who's already committed himself to serving the country, who has got all of these amazing skills that are quite transferable and translatable into other parts of the government, why don't we have programs to get them naturally going into the civil service or naturally into the FCO or working overseas or other sort of social and community projects? And they don't. It's like, yes, that there are career transition programs, but they're not necessarily designed to benefit from the money that's already been spent on the individual by the government. And I think...
And it would help with ignorance of civilian practices. And I'll give you a good example. One of the jobs I was in the when I left the military, I asked an employee to do something which I thought was reasonable. And the employee said, not my job spec. Okay, right. Went to my line manager, told her the situation. How do we do this? How do we get the job spec changed? Right, we need to sit down with HR. We need to draft the change, the reasons for the change. Then we need to engage with the unions to make sure the unions are happy. The union's happy. And something in the army was, all right, Smithy, can you go and do this for us? Yeah, no problem. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Sergeant X, I need you to do Y. Yeah, not a problem. Da-da-da. That doesn't exist in Civvy Street. It does to some degree, but if you want to make a major change or whatever, and that cultural aspect, again, if you're doing those job placements you're talking about, you could ease yourself. You could see how that works in Civvy Street, how people talk to each other, that type of thing.
And this comes back to the acceptance part I was saying about, because there's no problem with the fact that, you are an ex-military person who with a dark sense of humour, who likes to swear a lot and, talk about ops or whatever that you've been on. That's just part of who you are now. And that's fine. There's a place because you can hang out with other veterans and have all that banter, but don't do it at work. Keep your sort of work out on the work. And
Civvy humour is definitely different to military humour.
But that it's just about navigating a new landscape, isn't it? At the end of it.
Yeah.
And I think that this is what to go to those points of my experience of transition. If you wanted to just capture them, it was so when you're in. And this is what I was saying to you earlier, that I certainly didn't think, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I was in and I was serving, and it was quite a high tempo operation. So that was it. Your service ends. Okay. And so whether it's like yourself where you've got to the end of your service and you've decided, right, it's time to sort of move over, or it's like myself where it just sort of comes to an abrupt stop. You basically, you've got a better chance of being able to find a new career if you are in, say, your circumstances where you know it's coming, than if it's like injury or illness that causes you to leave. But then once you've accepted that you've got to get out, you really need to try and identify a career which will help you, because you need to pay your bills. You need to have that sense of pride and fulfillment that you can provide for your family. And you've got to work unless you're pensioned off. And so it's trying to identify as quickly as possible a career where you feel like you could spend, the next 20, 30 years and be able to sort of invest in that in the same way that you've invested in the military. And so there are so many providers of courses that will help you into whatever industry. That it could be construction, it could be logistics, it could be security, it could be banking, finance. That there will be a veteran program to help you to get into whichever one of them it is you want. So there's no problem with that. But there's no point starting a new career if your head's still in slightly the wrong place. So it's almost as if you've left. Okay, now I need to observe the situation and work out.
When you say head's in the wrong place, what do you mean by that?
Well, if you've got some sort of traumatic after effects of the military, and I think that if you are, say, I don't know, self-medicating with alcohol, for example, or drugs, or you're being quite destructive in your behaviours, you need to sort them out before you go into a new career. Because on paper, you might look like you've got everything, all the attributes for this new job, but actually, if you end up sort of turning up drunk or something, it's not going to last that long, is it? So, and I think that's where the bigger charities probably can really sort of help out initially, whether it's with mental health, combat stress and Robbery Legion and Help Heroes and stuff, that they can help with that sort of quite acute part of leaving if it's required. And then find yourself this career which will provide you with that sense of fulfillment, purpose, meaning, the mission for the next part of your life. And then you kind of go into the maintenance phase, and that's where Cockleshell sort of comes in. And it also means that you can tap back into the bigger charities if all of a sudden you realise that, the trauma's not quite been dealt with. Perhaps we need to revisit some therapy or revisit some sort of other support. And just that acceptance that you are ex-military, you've moved into this new career. There's lots of amazing other veterans around you that you can sort of connect with, whatever your particular passions are. You might like archaeology, you might like reading history, whatever. And there will be other people that will sort of want to get engaged in those type of activities with you. And I think that that's sort of what I experienced, and very much in the maintenance phase now of staying connected with veterans, trying to help others where I can, and still having that sort of sense of camaraderie and esprit de corps and adventure, which is probably what drove a lot of us to join the military in the first place. And so it's almost like you're staying the same as a person, you're just removing one organisation and replacing it with...
And it's still part of you. And I'd also say you have to build up a resilience to rejection in that opening phase that you're discussing, because in my own experience, I must have had applied for 6 jobs, never even got a letter back, never even heard from them. And that's quite strange, because in the military, you don't expect that. If you ask a question, you get an answer.
Yeah, some
feedback. But yeah, they won't even write back to you. Got 3 or 4 interviews. Thanks, but no thanks. And at that point, I'm thinking, your confidence starts to dip. Because you're there, quite a confident soldier. Well, why does nobody want me? And then I got a job. And it was like, wow, weight off your shoulders. But you've got to have that resilience to look rejection in the face. And then I end up with a really good job with a bit of luck, where my old boss, who I was on Granby with, phoned me up and said, I'm running a military project. I hear, do you want a job? And I was like, oh, okay, what is it? And it was an ideal job. And I had to still go for interviews and all the rest of it. But those lucky breaks, I would argue, are few and far between.
I've never been able to get a job since I left. I've applied for a few and just got rejected. And this is what I thought about when they say that, like, oh yeah, this is a pro-veteran company. And it's like, you've got this amazing CV that you've had like a CV writer help you sort of to craft perfectly for that particular role. Now, and it's just like, I got to a point where I was like, well, I'm just going to do my own thing instead. And that kind of lent itself.
But that's a good message for people, in that have that confidence. If you've got a certain skill, and it takes a lot of guts to do what you've done, go off on your own, set yourself up on your own, because it can be a big gamble. It's a lot of pressure working for yourself. But I think that's something else that a lot of people... I think being military, one of the things you do like is structure. And being self-employed doesn't necessarily give you that structure.
No, it's like sort of feast and famine with your money. It's working out, like you said, having that confidence to know what you're worth, like being able to have these hard conversations about money with people, because we always feel awkward about it, don't we? But then you'll end up seeing yourself off, and it's like, well, no, I'm not going to do that. It's like, I know what I want for this piece of work that I'm about to do, and I'm either going to get that or I'm not, and it's not unrealistic. So you just got to stand your ground a bit, and I think that ultimately would give you freedom. But it, like you say, it's very nervy at the beginning, because I was quite stupid, really, in the sense that you can get a job, or you can start up a company that'll eventually earn money, or you can do what I did, which was start up a social enterprise, which will never earn you any money. And so you've basically got all of the challenges of a startup company, but none of the financial rewards. You get a lot of rewards in other ways, but then you've still got to sort out your finances from different means, and it's that's especially challenging and not advisable, really. It's probably better for someone to make sure that they've got financial security before setting up more, like a charity, because if you ever go into a charity expecting it to pay you money or like to pay you wages, then I think you're probably going in for the wrong reasons. And that's why a lot of people get sort of caught out with sort of social enterprises and money that's not theirs, and end up.
Tom one's the latest example of that, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they went completely overboard, didn't they? Building spas and stuff.
I think another aspect we haven't touched on, and something that, again, I'd caution people on, is especially when they're doing that, getting out, 1 foot in the army, just left the army, into Civvy Street, is watch yourself on social media and LinkedIn, because everybody does well on social media, everybody does well on LinkedIn, and I fully admit to myself, I'd be looking at people on LinkedIn going, oh my God, they're really successful.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And that can cause you sort of mental health dips as well. So don't compare yourself to others.
I mean, people are only ever going to put their best day on.
Exactly.
Best thing on.
Exactly.
Never going to say, I'm having a really tough day today. I've been rejected by 5 companies.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about giving in. And it's all about that sort of perception. And I think that we're all becoming a bit more savvy to like the ills of social media nowadays, because it's like it's been around long enough that people realise the pros and cons of it, and it is really useful, like especially LinkedIn for connecting with people that you don't necessarily know, but no one's ever going to put anything on there about like how they're anything other than amazing. And so if you take it with a pinch of salt, then
yeah, absolutely. All right, mate, we'll wrap up now. We've got a couple more things we need to cover, but firstly, if anybody's interested in Cockleshell 22, I'll put links in the show notes again so that people can get in touch with you. But could MD apply for Cockleshell 22? How's it work?
So we're always looking for new members, and especially if we end up sort of signing on for the second season of this TV series, we're going to need lots of fresh faces to do various things on the sort of episodes, and so there'll be basically an opportunity to get trolled, and we will, if people follow us on Facebook especially, when it comes to that time, we'll be able to put a call out for people, and don't matter about age, gender, anything like that, because obviously there's going to be a variety of different things, and that's the sort of TV side. But then on top of that, we've got expeditions, and the way that I've sort of felt it was necessary is, rather than putting a massive call out and getting 50 new people in, and it sort of dilutes the community we've created, just organically let people in. And if they want to be part of it, they're going to reach out and ask and turn up to the training weekends and stuff, because there has to be that mutual commitment. And it's one of the reasons why we didn't go down the grant funding sort of side of, getting revenue for the organisation, because then you've got a certain sort of set criteria. You need to put 100 people through one of your training programs, and so you're just trying to fill bums on seats. Whereas the way that we're doing it, the only people that are going to get involved are the people that want to be involved, and they'll generally sort of fit in quite well.
And any military background, you don't need to be infantry, marine, para, everybody is that.
No, anyone at all. We've got like a variety of, like, we've got sailors, we've got quite a number of ex-bootnecks, but yeah, I'm Army. There's a couple of Army guys and RAF, so it's really open to everyone. And I think that, like, especially with what we're seeing with the Falklands expedition, because we've got this real opportunity to give this amazing set of like Falklands veterans this once in a lifetime expedition. It'd be great if we got some extra support with that. And we've got like a donate page on the website, and there's a couple of Just Giving pages at the moment live. So if anyone felt that they would like to contribute to those guys completing their expedition next February, then by all means.
Do us a favour, mate. Send me an email with all those links in, and I'll put them all in the show notes for people for easy access rather than people looking around them.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we can do that immediately. It's growing in a nice organic way. I'm not trying to be too quick, too big, but each of the things that we're doing is like really, really good and building on the next one. And very much what I would hope to see is that someone from the Falklands expedition will then come along and say, "What? I'm now going to run the next one." And we've got the infrastructure to provide for that. It's got a brand, it's got the social media presence, it's got a bank account, it's got all the governing documents, and it's got a blueprint of how to sort of run the expeditions. And so it's really a case of empowering someone else and creating that like butterfly effect.
Yeah.
And it goes from there.
Okay, right.
So
that was a good discussion there. And for listeners, two entirely different experiences. Myself at the end of 22 years, Loz with his own method of entry into Civvy Street. But if you want to speak to either of us, if Loz is happy, people can send questions in to me and I can forward them to Loz. But we're there to help. Loz has got plenty of contacts in the world. He's moving in now, and he'll be more than happy. I'm putting words in your mouth here, Loz, but you'd be more than happy to help people out, as we both are. So hit myself up or hit Loz up on the contacts we'll put down in the show notes, and we'll do the best to help out. And if you want to chat, we're probably quite happy to have a chat as well. So Loz, you were on the last episode, as we already discussed, and we did Desert Island Dits on that. No Desert Island Dits on this one. Fully, but I'd be interested to know, are you reading anything of interest at the minute?
Yes, I am actually always reading interesting things. I basically picked up Storm of Steel. So my son was reading it, and he told me to get onto it. So I'm just in the process of reading that at the moment, and I've spent quite a lot of time going around the World War I battle sites, and I recently went to Verdun as well. So actually, to see some of the forts that still are all in existence in France was very, very moving. And I think people will look at sort of Normandy and the D-Day beachheads and stuff. But actually, if you ever get the time to go and see some of the First World War battlefields in the Somme, on Ypres, Verdun, it's just so like mind-blowingly, humblingly what happened there.
Yeah.
And it's something that we should always, and it's a bit frustrating when you sort of see all the warmongering going on, whether it's with the Ukraine-Russia conflict or the Iran-Israel-Palestine situation. And how can people forget so quickly?
Human condition.
Yeah. And so that's very humbling. And the other one that I've just recently finished, actually, was called The Devil's Guard. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Is that about the Foreign Legion? The German SS guy goes to fight in Indochina with the French Foreign Legion.
So I've heard from some people that it might not necessarily be true, but if it's not, it's a very good novel. And it's by George Robert Elford, and he's basically had an interview with an SS colonel by the end of it that he just randomly met in Vietnam. And basically, he'd been an SS officer, lieutenant on the Eastern Front at the end of the Second World War. And rather than surrendering to the Soviets and likely being executed, they decided to flee across the American lines, and they made it to sort of like a rat run that took them through Switzerland and into the French Foreign Legion. And they were sent piecemeal over to Vietnam. It became apparent quite quickly that they were military trained, and because of the German accents, obviously the French had put two and two together. But at that time, they just needed to re-control their colonies in Indochina. And so they didn't really care who was doing it for them. But the Nazis applied their savage, what would you say, techniques to the Viet Minh, but with great effect, because what they were saying is that unlike the rest of the French Foreign Legion, the Viet Minh wouldn't fight them because they knew of the consequences. And so they were actually doing a lot of like free roaming sort of operations in the jungle in the rear areas and having great devastating effect. And to the point that the colonel in charge of these Germans basically put them all together into a unit, a battalion-sized unit, who basically for the next 5 years just caused havoc in Vietnam. But it was the political consequences of having these Nazis in the French Foreign Legion that caused them to be disbanded in the end. The reason why I read it was that apparently it was the most purchased book by US service personnel during the Iraq campaign. And what I found really interesting, I will end on this, is that one of the techniques that they used was to have these like bars fitted to the front of the vehicles with a light on it. And so when they were driving down the tracks, the Viet Minh would think that the vehicle was maybe 5 meters in front of where it actually was. And so they'd ambush that and give away the position. Yeah. But when I was in Iraq, and I'm not sure if you saw this, the Americans used to drive around with these big bars in front of their...
Protruding right out the front.
Yeah, with a heat plate on it to set off the IEDs. And I was like, I wonder whether someone's been reading that book and just come up with that idea.
Back in the 80s, Devil's Guard and The Forgotten Soldier by Guy Sager were about I think it was a French or Belgique guy that fought with the Germans on the Eastern Front. They were constantly doing the rounds. I don't know if you've read it, but a good companion piece to Storm of Steel is Memoirs of a Fox Hunting Man by Siegfried Sassoon. Have you read that?
I have not. No, I'm married.
Yeah, Memoirs of a Fox Hunting Man by Siegfried Sassoon, the First World War poet. Really interesting guy, not just a good poet, but he ended up influencing Wilfred Owen because he got sent to Craig Lockhart Hospital where Wilfred Owen was getting treated for shell shock and obviously PTSD as is now. And Sassoon threw his military cross into the Mersey as a protest against the war. And the government really couldn't do anything with him because he was such a well-known war hero. And basically they sent him to Craig Lockhart for a break before he went back to the trenches. But it's
okay.
So it's well worth a read. So
no, I will. I will definitely pick that up.
Yeah, no, it's good, mate. That was a really good chat. And I say just a little bit of clarification. Everybody's experience is different. I think overwhelmingly, Civvy Street's not to be feared; it's to be enjoyed. You just need to plan and make your own journey through to it.
Absolutely. You know, we've got all the tools and techniques that the military has kindly given us, and so we need to utilise them, take personal responsibility, and once we've got ourselves into the place we want to be, try and give back as much as we can to others, and that's about it, really.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see any feedback from your listeners, and yeah, like you said earlier on, I'm always here to help in any way that I can do.
That's great, mate. That's it for another episode. Thanks to Loz for coming on the podcast and to you, the listener, for your continued support suggestions. Please keep them coming in, and our email and social media links are at the bottom of the show notes. You can find us on all the usual suspects, including Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. And if you download from iTunes and like the podcast, it'd be great if you could leave us a review there or anywhere you get your podcast from. And finally, thanks again to Nick Beale for his continuing help and offering technical support for his company ISAR, and we'll see you next time on The Unconventional Soldier.